President Biden waved a ghost gun around the White House last April, and he had it ordered from top officials at the Justice Department and the ATF to be delivered to the White House for a press conference in April. I know this because I just got back a FOIA request from ATF, which shows the email chain that went from the White House ordering it to the Justice Department, top officials there, sending it over to the ATF, and when it got to the very top officials, the last email said, "Not for further dissemination." Well, now we have it. Well, this is part 5 of the investigation I've been doing since last April to find out how the President of the United States got gun parts and guns into the White House for this press conference that are illegal in DC for everybody else. So go to my Substack and read the whole investigation starting last April, emilypostnews.com. That's emilypostnews.com. You can read all 5 parts. And I'll briefly update you on where we started. Part 1 is when I wanted to find out how the White House got the ghost gun that President Biden was waving. At that point, we thought there was only one. I called the DC police, and they said they had nothing to do with it. So then I called the Secret Service, and the Secret Service said, yes, they were the ones who brought the guns onto federal property. So on federal property, it means they weren't in the district. But how did the guns get to the Secret Service? So then we went into part 2, and I talked to the ATF, which the Secret Service referred me to the ATF about this, and they said that they weren't going to tell me anything about the gun parts or the guns at all. There were going to be no information, but they did say that their agents were allowed to transfer the guns to the Secret Service at the White House because they're federal agents. So, you know, they're cops, they don't have to abide by the same laws as everybody else. That was sort of the excuse. That's what we got out of part 2. Part 3, I used a FOIA request. If those of you aren't familiar with that, that's Freedom of Information Act request. And it's how you get government documents turned over to the public. Well, I did a FOIA request on both the Secret Service and the ATF last spring. And when I got it back from Secret Service, that's part 3 of the story, I got all these photos of all these big gun parts. Guns, full AR, full pistols. So it was a cache of guns that the ATF provided to the White House for this press event. So it was not one little piece that the president was walking around in. So then I went back to ATF spokesperson and said, how exactly did you get these guns? Were they guns that you'd seized in crimes? How exactly you got them? And I got that because a tip said to me, they probably bought these guns. I thought they can't buy them on taxpayer dollars. But an ATF official told me at the time, this is part 4, that the agency occasionally buys guns for its mission in reference to this press conference. It's a press stunt. I don't think that's what our tax dollars are being used for, but that's what he said. That was part 4. So then I really wanted some more answers. And I've been waiting for this FOIA request since April. And I'll tell you in a bit. Stay tuned. I'll tell you all the back and forth I've had with ATF on trying to get these emails from them. But then I finally got this first group of emails now. And it shows that, and I've got one here, Ann Gannon, who is the senior advisor to the Deputy Attorney General, so this is top-level Justice Department, starts the email chain, and the subject line is PMF display for Rose Garden. PMF stands for personally made firearms, which is the proper term for what is commonly called ghost guns, which just means parts that don't have serial numbers on them, or a gun that doesn't have a serial number on them, which are heavily regulated, and President Biden's regulations went into effect on August 24th. They're being challenged in courts all over the country because they're gun parts and not guns. But I'm not getting into all of that. I'm just going to tell you how this all happened and what our government was doing for this press conference. So she writes this email and she sends it to a bunch of people in the Justice Department, top levels. Their names show, and then a bunch of people at the ATF. The subject is PMF display for Rose Garden. And it says, the department has been asked if a display of PMFs is possible for Monday's Rose Garden event. And that's when the censors came in. I'm holding that up so you can see all of that is removed. So we don't know exactly who she said, well, I'm assuming who she said has made this order, specifically what they're asking for. We're assuming this came from the White House, and we're assuming that this is what the White House wants, but they're not letting the public, us, know this. So I would like to see what's under there. The very end of it is, please let me know if this is possible. That's when the censors let us read again. So then this email went flying around ATF. That's the rest of the FOIA requests that I got. And it went up, and I have on, if you go to my Substack, you'll be able to see each person that it went to, how they bounced the emails around and how they started passing this order around. Because they had 4 days now to start buying all those guns I told you about, the cache of guns, or acquire them or get them out of seizure before this press event. So there's a lot of discussion. None of that is turned up in the FOIA, but they're talking to each other. And you can see it's for your consideration. I have some additional information as one of them. And then it gets up to Alfonso Hughes, and he says he's assistant director of a major part of the ATF, and assuming the one who would be getting these seized guns. And he says, he's talking about meeting with the chief of staff of the ATF about this. And he says, I will loop you into the conversation when I get a slot with Joe Allen, that was the chief of staff at the time, see the trail, not for further dissemination. Not for further dissemination. So they knew this is something that should not get out, and they were obviously trying not to have this get out. We're getting closer to the end of it. So then, as you can see, Gannon's emails was passed all the way up, and the decision was made. And we know now that they bought the guns, they seized the guns, and they got them over to the Secret Service for this press conference. And then you can also, again, this is all in my current story at emilypostnews.com. You can see all the directions goes, but we don't know yet still, because I still have more of a FOIA request in, who made the decision, who at the White House made this order, who at the ATF made the decision, how they decided it, and really I wanted to know is, did they buy guns for a press conference? Did they use taxpayer money for a press conference? I just want to give you a little background for those of you who are interested in how the FOIA has been working. So I filed the FOIA request on May 19th, and we have been going back and forth since then, and I will say the Public Affairs Office, who I was dealing with mostly through all this, referred me over to the FOIA office and said, just talk directly to them. So that's who I've been talking to back and forth. I will say they're very polite. I think they're trying to help and get everything we want, but what they've turned over so far is not acceptable, and that's not what I've asked for, and that's not how the law works. So on August 11th, I hadn't heard anything, so I emailed them and told them it had been 73 days for them to get me this information. And that's when the spokesperson said the department that handles FOIA said, we are experiencing a massive backlog along with a staffing shortage and have received over 1,200 requests this year. My supervisor is aware of your request and we're working on it. I don't doubt that they've got 1,200 FOIA requests into the ATF this year. So I am glad that they're doing this, but I'm still curious why we're not getting all this information. A month later, I still hadn't gotten anything. I asked again, and she said, we located records responsive to your request and processed them, but they require consultation with another part of the department. As soon as we get a response to our consultation request, we will send them in the documents. Well, I'm going to assume at some point this is when things got blocked out of the emails that I was asking for, that I got. I replied, they didn't even have the emails. This FOIA, when I got the FOIA request, when I got back what I got back, I pointed out to them just before I did the story. I said, look, you don't even have emails in here that I have with your spokesman talking about this. So look, this is not the full story. And then this is what the last thing I've heard back from them. I already sent a revised search to our tech folks who run the searches. We missed the email string you have because I didn't include public affairs in the list of targeted custodians. It is possible the decision-making and activity were handled in person or via telephone. And that's probably what happened. But if there's something else in writing, we'll track it down. I don't think it's possible that all those gun parts and all those guns were ordered, were bought, were purchased, were moved around departments, moved into the DC office, assigned to agents to take over to the White House 4 days later. I don't think that all happened on phone. And if it's phone, we won't know because there won't be any written records. We do know they probably had a lot of in-person meetings about this. And it was no further dissemination. Finally, she said to me, the more information we have, the better our searches are, but it's an art, not a science. I'm happy to keep working with you to be sure we find all responsive records. So that's where we stand now. I have told her I'm going to keep updating the story as soon as we have more information. We now know that top officials spent 4 days in April working on getting guns that the White House ordered them to do. We know that there's parts of it that they don't want us to know. And we know that it was an effective press conference, quite frankly, because the president was able to push through this rule that went into effect in August, that got these receivers and frames that have to have serial numbers on them and background checks. And if you have a personally made firearm and you take it to a licensed gun dealer, they have to put a serial number on it. So that's where we stand. I hope I will continue to update you on this story as I get more information on it. I encourage you to go back to my Substack, emilypostnews.com, so you can read through all 5 parts and where this started. Started with just a question: how did they get that gun into the White House? And now I can find out much more to it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I hope you hit that subscribe button, and I will keep reporting the facts from Washington, D.C.